Welcome back to the LoganExplores Podcast, the show where we uncover the stories of the past and explore the history that shaped the places we know today. I'm your host, Logan. Today we're traveling back to one of the most turbulent times in American history, a time when the nation was torn apart, communities were divided, and the future of the country hung in the balance. And right in the middle of it all was the small town of Statesville. During the mid-1800s, Statesville was a growing town in western North Carolina. It was a place of farmers, merchants, blacksmiths, and families trying to build a life on the frontier of a young nation. But in 1861, everything changed. The Civil War arrived, and Statesville would become a place of soldiers, prisons, hardship, and survival. Tonight, we're exploring what life was like in Statesville during the Civil War, from the early tensions before the war to the final days of the Confederacy. Before the Civil War, Statesville was already becoming an important community in western North Carolina. The town had been established decades earlier and served as the county seat of Iredell County. The location along trade routes made it a small but important center for commerce. Farmers from the surrounding countryside brought crops, livestock, and goods into town to trade. By the 1850s, the town had grown to include churches, small businesses, blacksmith shops, inns, and boarding houses. Life in Statesville moved slowly, but steadily. Plantations and farms in the region relied heavily on enslaved labor, just as much of the South did during this time. As debates about slavery intensified across the country, tensions began building between the northern and the southern states. Then in 1860, everything came to a breaking point. The election of Abraham Lincoln sent shockwaves throughout the South. Many southern states believed Lincoln's presidency threatened the future of slavery. Soon, state after state began leaving the Union. And in May of 1861, North Carolina seceded from the United States, joining the newly formed Confederate States of America. The Civil War had begun, and for the people of Statesville, life would never be the same. When the war began, men from across Iredell County rushed to join the Confederate Army. Companies of soldiers were formed right in Statesville. Young men, farmers, shopkeepers, and even teenagers volunteered to fight. Many of those soldiers joined regiments such as the North Carolina Infantry. Training camps were quickly organized. Families gathered in town squares and churchyards to say their goodbyes. Bands played music, flags waved, and soldiers marched off to war. But behind the excitement, there was fear. No one truly understood how long the war would last, or how devastating it would become. As the war dragged on, letters from the battlefield began arriving back in Statesville. Some told stories of bravery, others described unimaginable horrors. Many never came home at all. As the war intensified, Statesville began to take on a new and unexpected role. It became the site of a Confederate prison. In 1863, the Confederacy established a prison facility in the town to hold captured Union soldiers. The prison was located near the town courthouse and other government buildings. Union prisoners from battles across the region were transported to Statesville and held. Their conditions inside the prison were harsh. Food was scarce, medical care was limited, and disease spread quickly among the prisoners. But compared to some of the most infamous Civil War prisons, conditions in Statesville were sometimes considered slightly better. Even so, imprisonment during the Civil War was brutal. Many prisoners died from illness, malnutrition, or exposure. The presence of the prison also changed daily life in town. Residents of Statesville saw Union soldiers guarded through the streets. Confederate soldiers patrolled the area. The war, once far away on distant battlefields, had arrived right at their doorstep. Although Statesville never became the site of a major battle, the war increasingly affected the town as the years passed. By 1864, the Confederacy was struggling. Union armies were advancing deeper into the South. Railroads were destroyed, supplies became harder to find, food shortages spread across the region. For the people of Statesville, daily life became much more difficult. Many families were left without husbands, fathers, and sons. Women often ran farms and businesses while the men were away fighting. Inflation skyrocketed. Basic goods became expensive or impossible to find. Stories circulated of desperate families trading valuables just to obtain food. The war was draining the town of its resources and its people. By early 1865, the Confederacy was nearing collapse. Union forces under William Tecumseh Sherman had marched through Georgia and into the Carolinas. Sherman's campaign devastated much of the southern countryside. Railroads were destroyed, cities were burned, plantations were abandoned. Fear spread across North Carolina as rumors of the avenging Union Army reached towns like Statesville. Many wondered, would the Union Army destroy the town? Would fighting reach the streets? But the war would end before large battles reached Statesville. In April 1865, the war finally came to an end. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army at Appomattox Courthouse. Soon after, Confederate forces across the South began surrendering as well. The Confederacy was finished. For the people of Statesville, the end of war brought both relief and uncertainty. Thousands of soldiers began returning home, but many never did. Families mourned loved ones who had died in the battle or in prison camps. The town now faced the difficult task of rebuilding after 4 years of war, and one of the biggest changes still lay ahead. Slavery had been abolished. The social and economic system that had defined the South for generations was gone. Statesville, like the rest of the South, would now enter a difficult and complicated period known as Reconstruction. Even though the war ended in 1865, its legacy remained deeply rooted in Statesville. The town had lost many of its young men. Families had been permanently changed. Graves of Civil War soldiers became part of the local landscape. Stories of the war were passed down through generations. And the town that once sent soldiers marching proudly into battle now carried the memories of a divided nation. Today, when you walk through the historic streets of Statesville, it's hard to imagine the uncertainty and fear that once filled this quiet town. But the Civil War left its mark here, just as it did across the entire country. And those stories remain an important part of the town's history. And that's the story of Statesville during the Civil War. A story of soldiers, prisoners, families, and a town caught in the middle of one of the most defining conflicts in American history. If you enjoyed this episode of Logan Explores Podcast, be sure to follow the show and share it with someone who loves history. And if you're ever walking through the historic streets of Statesville, remember that beneath the quiet charm of the town today lies a past shaped by war, struggle, and survival. Thanks for exploring history with me. I'm Logan, and I'll see you next time.